you've been seeing the Environmental Agency. We saw some awful pictures and videos over the course of the late summer with all the sewage, raw sewage being pumped into the sea. The Isle of Wight was particularly badly hit, as was the south coast of Sussex, where I like to take my dog for a walk. What have you managed to achieve? What have you been saying? What have you been talking about?
Well, okay, when the environment, okay, clearly the amount of poo to not to put too fine a point of it, the amount of sewage going into the sea and our rivers and our beaches is completely unacceptable and has been for years. And it's a worsening problem over the last 20, 25 years. And I think government is now catching up, and we've rightly put through this Environment Act, which is going to be a game changer. When that was happening, I persuaded Southern Water, and I said to Southern Water, you need to prioritise the Isle of Wight, and you need to run us as your sort of pilot scheme, example of best practice. So I'm very happy now that they're pouring a lot of time, money, and effort into making sure that the Isle of Wight's beaches and rivers indeed are much cleaner than they're going to be. And so that's what I've been persuading them to do. And, we have regular demonstrations and protests about the quality of, and, don't get me wrong, most of our beaches are pretty clean most of the time, but sometimes when there is seawater, rainwater discharge, that's when you get the pollution, that's when you get the sewage into the sea, and that's not acceptable. So the Isle of Wight is now going to be an example of best practice for Southern Water, who I'm delighted to say seem to be serious about wanting to clean up their act. What I want to do is make sure that the Environment Agency is all over them and making sure that they use the island as an example of best practice, because not only do we have sea swimmers, including people like myself, occasional sea swimmer, but we've also got our beaches are really important for our tourism. Our
Yeah, of
beaches
course.
to be the
But I mean, what they need to do surely is to spend a lot of money on their infrastructure, so that when there are these incidents where there's a lot of rainwater, it doesn't result in the spillage of sewage into the sea, because that seems to be the issue.
There is, and there's very expensive ways of achieving this, and there's slightly cheaper ways of achieving this. The idea that you can simply build a dual system in the UK is going to cost tens of billions. It's going to be unaffordable, and it will take years, if not decades. So what they're doing is some infrastructure work. And clearly, look, there's a terrible problem with leakage of water in this country.
Unbelievable.
It's a separate issue, and it's pretty shocking in its own right, to be honest.
Yeah.
When it comes to overflow, because the overflows happen when you've got a rush of rainwater in the system, if you can do some restructuring of your pipelines and some restructuring of your infrastructure, but you combine that with other things like on industrial estates, on roadways, on driveways, working out how you absorb more water in the ground around that and less going into the drains, you can have a significant impact. And I'll tell you one example in related to that. In a little village called Haven Street, which some of your listeners may know because it's famous for its fantastic little steam railway, the Southern Water have given out slow water or slow release butts, these butts that collect water and they release them into the ground very slowly afterwards.
Right.
And since that has happened, there hasn't been a single case of sewage discharge into the pipes there. So what we're trying to do now is roll out this scheme throughout the island. So we're doing practical things that everyone can help with when it comes to reducing the amount of stormwater or rainwater that goes into the system at certain times, and will therefore hopefully do a significant amount to prevent raw sewage going into the beaches and seas around the island and indeed off the coast all around